Okay, so this is the special meeting of the Economic Development Commission, Town of Fairfield on Thursday, August 12th. It's now 8:33 a.m. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. I'm joined by the Chairman, Kevin Lesko, and Commission members Don Peterson, Ken Hockhauser, John Slavin, and Justin Beck, as well as our recording secretary, Gretchen Gerthner. Kevin, you want to call the meeting to order and go from there?
I do. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for starting our warmer day with our meeting. As a rule, we always start by doing the approval of the minutes. Everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes from the June 3rd meeting. I'd like a motion to approve those as read.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. That's great. So that's out of the way, and I think we can just jump it right back to Mark and see what Mark has to tell us.
Yeah, thanks. Steve Rosato just emailed me. He said he was not able to attend. Something came up at work, so he's not able to join. So
Very good.
we'll excuse Steve this time.
Yeah, that's right.
So just briefly, I thought it would be helpful. I know we don't typically have meetings in August, but there are a couple things popping up. Wanted to get some feedback. Most notably, we'll get to it in a minute, but Justin was talking a little bit about the ARPA funds, which town boards will begin to formally consider in September. But first, and the other thing that Justin touched on was, with regard to the COVID response and the governor's recent executive order, basically punting decision back to local communities as to whether or not to require masks for indoor or other events, meetings and such. So currently, a lot of the major cities have implemented requirements to wear masks when indoors and not being able to socially distant. I think all the major cities, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Stanford, Norwalk, Danbury, have all instituted requirements to that extent. It's been a conversation here locally, and I know I've gotten a few phone calls from businesses and individuals inquiring as to whether or not our stance is going to change. And as of yesterday, when I talked to Brenda Kupchak, the first select woman, I think we're still adhering to our guidance, which is that we're going to encourage people to wear masks. Certainly those that are unvaccinated should wear masks when indoors and not being able to socially distance. That's a requirement for all town buildings. But we're going to encourage others, if they feel comfortable or if they would like to wear a mask, certainly do so, but it's not required. And I don't think that position is going to change unless something drastic happens on the front. We've been doing pretty well in terms of vaccination status. I think, obviously want to encourage people to get vaccinated. Want to encourage people, to maintain appropriate safety protocols, but I don't think that, at least my understanding is that we're not going to require that as of now or in the immediate future. I guess unless circumstances change. So that I wanted to put out there. I don't know if folks had any questions or have been getting calls or emails or inquiries as well, but that's where we are at the moment.
That makes good sense. And it doesn't surprise me with the cities mandating as they are. I think it's in response to the larger population of unvaccinated individuals. Yeah. And then how the numbers are bearing with infection for those that population. And thankfully our towns are, and this in particular, I think we have a very high concentration of vaccinated individuals. I'm thankful to the governor for his position. I really am. I think that was prudent.
Yeah, so I'll just pivot briefly and give a very brief update on the COVID small business assistance grants. We have one new application which is incomplete, so we continue to get the word out to local businesses that are struggling to reopen. We still have about $20,000 remaining in the original grant allocation. We've assisted over 80 businesses to date, provided up to roughly $320,000 committed grants totaling $320,000, of which the vast majority, I think when I last checked, was 99% expended at this point. So most of the people have, there's a small balance in a couple of the accounts, but otherwise most of the folks have used it for the purposes for which assistance was granted. But we still have some monies available. So if you know of businesses that are continuing to struggle to reopen, dealing with some liabilities or past obligations, bills that they can't cover, they haven't been able to catch up, please refer them over here, because we do have some small business grants that we can provide some help. So that's pretty much it on that front. I will say that the only other thing I wanted to note was we did recently do a survey of our restaurant community to see how they're doing. We had I think we probably sent out around 100 to about 100 restaurants here, of which we got 34 responses. So not too bad. It was mostly around the question of outdoor dining as to how helpful that was to their business. About 28% of the businesses had used a temporary authority to create a new outdoor dining location at their business. 50% had expanded their existing outdoor dining location. 75% of those restaurants indicated that the outdoor dining was either very helpful or somewhat helpful to their business. 66% said it was very helpful to the survival of their restaurant during the pandemic, which is still ongoing. We did ask about whether or not they would be interested in continuing to have an expanded outdoor dining footprint after the temporary authority lapses, and 78% indicated that they would. 81% of those respondents indicated that they would be supportive of any change in the town's regulatory stance with respect to the requirement to provide for additional parking for outdoor dining space. Currently, you get 150 square feet of outdoor dining space without any imposition of additional parking requirements. And so what we wanted to do was ascertain whether or not there would be support if we were to increase that. And 81% indicated they thought that it was a good idea. It's the same number of folks, 81%, indicated that there was adequate parking at their location for their customers, given outdoor dining. And all this, I think, is pretty good news, because many of these outdoor dining locations are actually taking away existing parking spaces. So if they're able to satisfy both their patron demand for parking, that they're not getting complaints from customers, they can't find a parking space to come to the restaurant, even taking away parking spaces or otherwise, because they've pushed their outdoor dining space into the parking lot, for example. I think that augurs well in terms of our argument to planning and zoning. Maybe we should relax our requirements even further. We did ask some general questions about how they're doing. 59% indicated they're either doing much or somewhat better than last year, although 25% said they were about the same year over year. Asked questions as to how they saw their business conditions changing over the course of the next 6 months. And there's obviously a great deal of uncertainty out there. So again, the 44% indicated they just weren't sure. Sizable, I'd say 27% said that they thought it would be getting slightly, conditions would be improving. 25% indicated about the same. And again, 43% said they just didn't know. So they were unsure. We'd also asked, what are the big impediments or challenges that your restaurant's facing right now? 99% indicating that it was increased cost of goods was a big challenge, and 85% indicating that they were having difficulty either in attracting or retaining staff. This is something we've consistently heard, not just among the restaurants, but other retail businesses, that they're having a hard time hiring and keeping workers. So that remains a major issue. So all in all, it was helpful feedback. The reason, again, that we asked some of these questions, there's a temporary authority currently through the state law that lapses early next year, that continues or keeps in place a lot of the temporary measures that were created through the governor's executive order, allowing for restaurants to expand their outdoor dining footprint in contravention of town regulations or zoning regulations otherwise. So those will expire next year. As I said, we currently allow restaurants to have outdoor dining, but only 150 square feet without creating some additional parking to satisfy an outdoor dining location. So I think really a low-hanging fruit here. And perhaps there's other measures that we could consider as well, but we should at least think about increasing that 150 square feet to 450 square feet or something like that. I think when we looked at the outdoor dining footprints of most restaurants, the median was about 500 square feet in terms of the outdoor dining locations that were approved as part of this temporary measure. Now, not everyone will be able to do that, because unless we provide for some offset so that some of these businesses can take into account some of these these existing parking lots and use those for their purposes, they may not be able to take full advantage of it, but at least make it a little easier. And the whole thought is, if people are either sitting outside to have a meal or they're going inside, generally it's not both where they're full. So there is some offset between the two. So we feel like there's adequate justification to support that change. And, the evidence has been for the past year and a half or so that it really hasn't been an issue in terms of people being able to find parking or creating off-site hazards or issues for customers or for the abutting property owners. So that's hopefully where we're going with this. I don't have a proposal for you to consider. We have a special meeting anyway, but we did want to at least survey restaurants to see whether or not they would be supportive of that change, and clearly they are. So hopefully next month we can have a further conversation about this. And my thought was that the commission, this commission would propose a text amendment to the zoning commission, which we would present to them at their earliest opportunity. I know their calendar is pretty full, but if we get it in place before the end of the year, so next outdoor dining season, we do have some provisions that last beyond the expiration of the existing legislative authority. So that's the thought. Any questions?
I have a comment. So when it comes winter time, obviously there's going to be some challenges with outdoor dining. Will these restaurants be allowed to put up temporary structures?
They are now, but that's all covered under the existing legislative authority, which does sunset next year. So that's another thing that maybe we want to consider. I'm not sure how that will all play in terms of the zoning issues, but that definitely has been very helpful, I think, for many.
Mark, considering some of the restaurants, I've seen in New York and in other towns, we're obviously taking up more sidewalk space. I've seen some restaurants go into parking spaces on the main street, and I don't think in the town there are any issues with parking. At least I haven't experienced it. I also think people, if they can go out, will either carpool or Uber. And so I'm wondering if we do allow opening more space, because I think that clearly there's demand. Is it possible for us to move some of those outdoor spaces actually into the street where there would be normal parking and just not have parking? I mean, if I think about like downtown Fairfield, right? The parking in back of the university bookstore is a great place to be, right? And even in when I think about that area, there's parking on or around the side from across from the Toto restaurant. Like, I guess my point is, I agree 1,000% with expanding the area to open up dining. But if we need more space, would we consider a proposal to allow going into parking spaces on the main streets, as long obviously as it's safe for cars to get by, or there's some sort of barrier, or there's more police to enforce the speeding so that somebody doesn't get hit. But I've seen restaurants in New York City go into the street, right? And I think for us it would show, yes, we're open for business, there's demand. And then that leads into the second question that I have is, have you gotten feedback on the personnel perspective, where is the problem that the economy is just, for lack of a better term, too good, that there's just too many jobs out there and these restaurants can't find people? Or is it that people are still getting government subsidies and just choose not to go back to work? I don't know.
Yeah, the second question, I think it's a little bit muddled, because I think there's a lot of different explanations. I'm sure there may be some that are hesitant to return to the industry and are able to make ends meet with the supplemental assistance, and maybe when that ends, they're forced to go back into that industry or choose another career profession. But I do think there's a lot of different explanations. I've heard from some that it's still a little difficult to arrange for, if you have kids, small kids, for childcare. That's been an issue for some. Some just have a lot of concerns. It's a very personal thing in terms of their health safety, and clearly folks in particular industries are more exposed or more on the front lines than others. And so maybe people don't want to be in the hospitality, food service type industry, frontline type workers. But I think there's a lot of different explanations. I think there's some of it, but that's related to the supplemental assistance, that they're not forced to choose that. I don't know how big that is, and the supplemental assistance will be ending within the next couple weeks anyway. I think September. So I guess we'll have to see. There's always similar to like the commercial space, there's seemingly a disconnect between where the jobs are and where the workers are. So I think that's partly true too, that sometimes there's a disconnect between, there's certainly jobs out. I mean, the unemployment rate has come down quite a bit, but there are still people looking for work, but there's a lot of job openings at the moment. So I think there's a lot of different explanations for it. And people are just taking an opportunity, I think, as to whether or not they want to stay in the industry itself. So I don't have, some have asked, well, is there something the town can do to help restaurants or other businesses, retail industries, find workers? And I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think we're going to have to let it play itself out. I think there'll be a point which, wages are coming up, whether it's mandated through the minimum wage increases or, businesses are now having to pay a little bit more including signing bonuses to hire people. And I think at some point, there'll be enough financial incentive for folks to get back into the workforce. So I'm not sure what if there's a role for us to play in that regard. I think it's more we have to let the market kind of sort itself out.
Yeah, I think it'll even itself out. I mean, obviously we have, inflation happening in the short term until supply catches up with demand. We're going to see that. But from a personnel perspective, it's just confusing to me. Like we've seen this before in really good economies where, either you're having bad service, or you're not getting enough people to sort of, work, right? And I'm trying to sort of, it'll be interesting to see after September if all of a sudden, there's more supply of people, and aside from that, where else are the people going to come from? If it's other towns and recruiting, from other areas. But I think the best thing to do is to sit back and see how that plays out in September. But in the meantime, whatever we could do to allow these businesses to expand their capabilities if people don't want to be sitting inside, especially now. I mean, I agree with Justin and I agree with Brenda about the mask. I mean, if you're vaccinated, it should be your choice at this point. And if you're not, then, that's the risk that you decide to take. That's fine. But, these restaurants, I think we've done a tremendous job in town to just, give them the support they need. And those ones that have survived, you want to make sure that they have more space if they need it. If people aren't comfortable inside, then let's give them more space outside as long as we can until it starts to get a little bit cooler. And so, again, I fully support, whatever we need to do to relay that message.
We may want to test some of the other strategies a little bit more. I mean, we focused in on, because again, it was fairly easy to understand, explain, and I thought the commission should, the Planning and Zoning Commission should be generally supportive of increasing the outdoor dining parking exemption square footage. But we may want to test some of these other concepts further. I'm not sure. There was some. I wouldn't say pushback, but at least some concerns on the part of some of the restaurant operators. We have to drill down a little bit deeper into who was answering these questions. But clearly, they're feeling some of the pinch from. It's a pretty competitive marketplace. We got a lot of restaurants there, and more that are trying to come into the market. So I sense that there was some concern about, exactly what measures we were proposing. It doesn't, apply equally across. I think generally that most restaurants would be supportive of anything on these fronts, but some of the strategies, and we didn't really ask a lot of questions about, well, what do you think about this strategy or that strategy? It was really, how's the parking situation? Could we increase the outdoor dining footprint without imposing some issue in terms of parking? And clearly the response to that was, yeah, we think we have enough parking on site. We can do that safely. But, in terms of the more urban style where you have people creating temporary dining spaces on the street, I mean, Stanford's done that. We did get a couple comments saying, don't do what Stanford did. So
it looks kind of sloppy, honestly.
Well, I mean, it can be, but on the other hand, it's some of them are very nice. It depends what they've done.
But I mean, if you're shutting down a street to pedestrian use only, it's awesome. But
But
that's hard on Route 1. Right.
I have not been able to even get folks on Sanford Street on the same page as to whether or not we could create a one-day pedestrian mall. I don't know how we did it back in the days of Bastille Day.
Right.
But man, it's tough wrangling all those folks to get them on the same page. Just do it for a day, let alone permanently. So.
Mark, can we double back to the commercial parking requirements? Could you remind us of what the requirements are for retail, for office, and for restaurant? Because they are different, are they not?
They are. It's really the issue that we have mostly is between retail and food service use.
Right.
And so there's been some conversation to try to equalize
Right.
parking requirements as it relates to food service versus straight retail. And the reason being that it would be far easier, for property owners and landlords, prospective tenants to navigate that and to switch back and forth depending on market demand. And I'm not sure. I think the commission is interested in having a conversation about that. I don't know if there's full support for it, but I think we should put it on the table for sure.
The
And
food service portion is the higher requirement.
is the higher requirement, yes.
So
Based on patron floor area typically.
So where I'm going with this is that we now have, because of the outdoor seating and kind of the relaxed requirement for the extra seating, we've kind of created a proven
Experiment, right.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if in equalizing these parking requirements, it would actually naturally create capability for the outdoor seating for these restaurants. It all of a sudden if we get that done, then the other parts get solved on their own. Do they not?
Well, I don't know, because most of these, and that may not be that impactful for existing restaurant operators, because most of the restaurants, particularly those downtown, do not currently comply with the parking requirements. They're operating by dint of a variance that was
Okay.
granted by ZBA.
Okay,
And so my larger point to zoning was, well, if you're granting variances 100% of the time to restaurants downtown, then
Right.
maybe we should change the regulations because
right, okay,
clearly there's support for that, and it's not an exception to the rule anymore. It is the rule. So
right, okay.
but
So,
I think I think they're different issues, but generally what we found, to your point, is that even before the pandemic, I think the argument could be made that when it's nice weather, people want to sit outside, and your indoor dining space is not as full as it was because most people are sitting outside. So they're not in aggregate, they're somewhat offsetting seating demand. So there's no need to have additional parking required as a result of it, because you're not using 100% of both the indoor and outdoor space simultaneously. It's either one or the other.
Mhm.
And then to your point, yeah, I think the pandemic has been helpful in that one limited regard, is it's given us an opportunity to experiment a little bit. And we've seen the results of that thus far. Even with increased business activity, the parking hasn't been an issue. So I think we can safely increase or decrease the parking requirements as relates to this particular type of use.
so as we're asking the zoning to change the codes, will this be one of those items?
Yes, on both fronts. I think we might want to consider, and there may be an opportunity to do that. The broader question of equalizing parking requirements amongst all retail classes, including food service, that may be separate or may be combined with this request to look at parking as it relates to outdoor dining. And there may be other strategies that we want to put forward that are currently limited by our zoning or other permitting requirements, such as outdoor dining structures or taking away parking, using both public space, whether it's within the street or on the sidewalk, so long as people can, obviously it's safe and people can navigate and get by. Maybe there's some other strategies we should look at too. We just didn't. I think we might want to go back out and come up with a host of other potential strategies that we'd want to get some more feedback from, just to gauge support before. Because the last thing I would do is put forward some proposal at the restaurant
industry doesn't see as helpful. So I
I
think.
agree.
I agree. And I can't help but think that 20%, the 80% was positive, the 20%, as you said, drilled down a little bit. I'm wondering if they are unwilling to participate in outdoor seating, or they just don't have an appropriate space, and so therefore they don't want to have to compete because they know they can't.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Clearly, you're hearing that some. I didn't go into doing a further analysis, but again, we should drill down and to look, because we asked geographically where they're situated. Some actually did provide their business name and address for follow-up. So there's opportunities for us to cross-tabulate some of this and do further analysis.
So we have some work to get this done for the fall,
Yeah.
for sure.
I agree. But I think the plan would be, I don't think that zoning's got a pretty full calendar anyway with applications. So as long as we have something in place for next year when they consider the renewals for outdoor dining, that would make sense. So we have a little bit of time to work with them, but not a lot.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. We should probably move along. We should probably look a little bit at the American Recovery Plan funds, if you have some ideas on the priorities.
I put forward, so the administration did come forward with its proposed allocation of the monies being allocated either directly to the town or as part of the county allocation. We don't have counties in Connecticut, so that's being channeled through the state. But there's a total of $28.5 million that will come to the town. There's a proposal before town boards, which they'll formally consider in September. It's a little bit of, there's a lot of things that could be a potential uses of funds for which they're eligible. I think there's been an attempt to balance geographically across various types of programs and needs that are out there with the community. That's part of the process, sausage making process, I guess. But from an economic development perspective, I was asked to present on a couple areas. One was working with our counterparts in planning and zoning to try to get some additional dollars so we complete the POCD update and our zoning regulation update. The zoning regulations have been rewritten or updated in over 3 decades. And I think anyone who's spent any time reading through them can see that they do need to be updated, not just in light of recent changes to state law, but to deal with some of the issues we've been talking about, but just for ease of navigation and reading. And to be reflective of our current land use priorities and policies and goals, which is part of the POCD update. So we've been going through an update to our plan of conservation development for over 2 years now. And part of that's been obviously disrupted because of the pandemic, but just relying upon in-house staff to do that on top of their regular job is just, we'll be here probably another 3 or 4 years to complete the POCD update at our present pace. So to bring in some outside resources does make sense. And clearly, this is the thing that's most determinant of how we consider, investment opportunities, development goals in town. Without an overarching plan, guidance document, it's really tough to give businesses advice, developers advice as to, where they should invest and what the town's, what's going to be the reaction to it. So we're kind of going through this process now. I think it would be helpful to complete that with a modest amount of funds. We should have frankly put this money in the town budget a few years back and completed this, but we'll hopefully get some support for that. And then, we had struggled over the years in the wake of several storm events, but then we've just seen with increasing regularity, frequency, and severity of flooding downtown in other areas of town as well, along the Rooster River watershed, for example. And that's part of the plan as well. to address some of these more resiliency type issues. And so we had commissioned a study in the wake of the last major storm event. We got some federal grant dollars and had Malone and McBroom look at whether or not we can improve the situation downtown to prevent these or mitigate some of the flooding impacts. We're not going to prevent it completely, but at least decrease the severity and number of incidents that do occur. And some of those strategies have been implemented. We did increase the capacity on Sherman Green through additional detention. But there's other things that were in that plan that we never implemented. So there is money in there as well. But, you know, there are other things I'm sure that commission members may have. I mean, we've talked about there's monies in the plan for sidewalk and pedestrian streetscape enhancements, predominantly in Stratfield. We're at the Four Corner project in Southport. But we've been looking at downtown as well, you know, doing some of the improvements there, perhaps in Southport Village proper, as opposed to along Post Road. So there's other areas that we could potentially spend money on. The traditional role of government is always to put in place infrastructure to support business development. So, you know, those are some of the thoughts. I mean, we've been trying to support our tourism hospitality industry. And, you know, a few years back, we did a wayfinding plan, developed a master plan, but didn't have dollars to allocate to create wayfinding signage and informational kiosks and things like that. Again, would require some capital expenditure at some point. So a couple things that I put forward. I did not request additional small business direct financial assistance to small businesses, mainly because we have a program in place and we still have money in that. I'm not seeing the demand given the number of applications that are coming in at this point, which are fairly small. So I don't know if commission members have other thoughts or ideas, or I can answer any questions, but that's where we are at the moment. And as I said, they're going to take this up in September. So if we do have some thoughts, probably now's the time.
I have one or two. I'm not familiar with, and you probably are, any particular properties out there that need remediation separate from the fill pile challenge, but just general commercial properties, potential commercial properties or existing that are vacant that need work in order to make them palatable for some business or entity to come in and say, you know, we want to build a structure here or develop a business.
So there is money through the region and through the state for brownfield investigation and remediation. And I've not been able over the years to get properties to take advantage of that. And we don't have any properties that fall into that category where they have fallen behind in paying their taxes such that we might be considering acquiring them or foreclosing on them for unpaid taxes. And then we have this situation where a brownfield site, we don't really know what we're getting into and how best to remediate it. So, you know, Handy and Harmon is a good example. It's not for lack of money on the investigatory or regulatory standpoint. It's partly, you know, the inertia between the private entity who doesn't want to spend the money until they actually have to, and then the state regulatory agency that has, you know, 1,000 of these sites throughout the state. So their attention is somewhat limited to any one site. And we have a consent order in place, but, you know, we need to constantly push both parties to complete the remedial investigation and then move to, and we've had interest from the development community looking at that site saying, hey, you know, can we put retail there? Can we put a self-storage facility there? Can we do a lot of different things? But it's not that we don't have monies or funds available for remedial investigation. We don't have a project. And I've not, you know, when I've talked to, you know, Miller Volkswagen, for example, over the years, and so there are other sites that might be good candidates, they just don't want to go through the hassle of the process. So the money goes for, you know, it's directed elsewhere within the region, but, you know, there is money available. So I'm not sure that that would probably be something that we have an immediate need for. I mean, if we were in Bridgeport, I'm sure they have a bunch of things that people don't pay their taxes, and the cities then forced to, well, what do I do? Do I foreclose on this? And I am the liability, even though there's some protection against that. But yeah, that's not something I see as a great need out there.
Mark, I seem to recall that we spoke about the Kings Highway flood remediation a bit, and we came up with the concept of if we were able to remediate the flooding by like 1.5 feet or something like that, it expanded our capability of development exponentially on Kings Highway. It seems to me that would be money incredibly well spent.
And I think that's part of that Rooster River watershed.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that, what Kevin's describing, if we can take properties out of the flood zone or flood plain, they won't be forced to incur additional. I mean, they'll be able to redevelop their sites without going through, a lot of the regulatory issues, the hurdles that they currently face. And it's not, there's some properties in town that you wouldn't ordinarily think of as susceptible to flooding, but they're actually within the flood zone or floodplain. So, and it really, if we can address some of the upstream issues, we might be able to do a flood map revision and get some of these properties outside of that, which will allow them to better invest or redevelop their sites. So that is part of the proposal. I'm looking to see what they have monies in there for, but it's fairly large amount of money that we have towards the Rooster River flood protection project.
And there's quite a bit of property that is just in limbo on that section of town.
Yes. Yeah.
Commercial property or the opportunity to create commercial property.
Yeah. They have a proposed $3.2 million, $3.25 million towards providing some additional detention within the Rooster River watershed. So that would be helpful. And that's based again on a study a hydraulic study that was done some time ago.
There was actually a really impressive chart, topo chart that they showed to the new commissioners. They showed where it is now, and then they showed after remediation of flooding, how much more of the property became more useful out of the floodplain or flood zone. So, okay. So
Justin, I'm sorry, Kevin. Justin, was there a property, back to the brownfield, was there a property in particular you're thinking of?
No, I'm not familiar, particularly with the ones you're talking about. I guess one of them you were referencing is the one across from Whole Foods Market. Which one is that?
Yeah, that's the Handy and Harmon site.
Right.
And our big issue with that is, and really we all fall victim to this, it's constantly I have to constantly put pressure on. I think we just need a amount of pressure campaign, if you will, on both the regulatory agency, which is DEP and EPA, as well as the private company. And I understand the company's motivations because it's a publicly traded company and they don't have to put this on their balance sheet until they actually have completed their remedial investigation and they know what their liability is. So, so I suspect that that's part of why they're dragging their feet. They don't have to do it. So, why spend the money?
Right.
And then the state will say, well, if you have a development application pending, maybe that'll change our calculation in terms of where how we prioritize our resources. But it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. We can't get anywhere until we understand what the risk, what's the liability, what do we have to do to clean up the site, how much it's going to cost. And then when we do have somebody that's willing at least willing to start a conversation to maybe take on that risk, they quickly run into, these hurdles. So it's, I've talked to the first selectwoman about it. I think what we all need to do is probably develop an overarching, I guess, pressure campaign would be the way I would characterize it, but we just need to sustain pressure on DEP to kind of hold the company's feet to the fire, because the company's like, well, we respond, and then they, 6 months to a year goes by and they don't hear anything back. So they've done what they need to do, but this is just on a slow path to nowhere at this point.
Do we want to, those commission members, would you like to submit any proposals or ideas that you might have to Mark, that he might be able to put a list together that we might be able to review for September?
Yeah, we should move pretty quickly. If anyone has any other ideas,
Yes.
Don, Ken, or Justin, you said you had a couple thoughts, but I did put forward another thing that we've been talking about, which is short of funding, is the East Trunk Sewer
Yes.
replacement, infrastructure project. They're doing testing right now to determine what the environmental issues or costs might be as they put in the new sewer trunk line. But again, for those not familiar, the East Trunk Sewer is undersized. It's subject to inflow and infiltration impacts. So you're treating at the plant, you're treating rainwater and other waste products that not even it's stormwater. You don't have to go through the same treatment disinfecting process, so that takes up the capacity of the pipe. But it serviced 60% of the town, and including all the eastern area, which is primarily where a lot of our industrial manufacturing, to what extent it's left, or commercial uses, where they're all located. So it's a pretty big issue, but again, I understand they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. It's even with Rooster River 3.2, I think they thought, in one respect, there really isn't another funding opportunity perhaps for East Trunk Sewer. We did get some grant monies. There might be some other funding out there to do those types of projects, but I don't necessarily have an issue with the obviously I'm part of the team here, but I don't have an issue. But I know other committees and commissions and boards have put forward other ideas that perhaps we haven't thought of. So I just want to give folks the opportunity.
I think the East Trunk and the Rooster River remediation actually are hand in hand in the development of that section of town, which holds a lot of promise for us.
Well, one way or the other, we have to deal with it for sure.
For sure. Okay, so I guess Beverly's probably not here. I don't.
No, Bev has her executive board meeting.
Yep, okay.
Meeting. So.
Okay. I actually just kind of skipped something. Any particular updates for developments or pending applications that you might want to share, or we kind of quiet right now?
Yeah, the only thing, there's a couple. I'm sure you're all aware that the public hearing on Chick-fil-A was on Tuesday this week. Was continued. They didn't complete the public hearing. Most of the focus is obviously on traffic and how the site will accommodate the anticipated traffic associated with the use. And I told the representative, the attorney representing Chick-fil-A, that we just weren't in a position at this point to opine one way or the other on the application. From an economic development perspective, it doesn't have a huge economic impact. You're basically taking an existing restaurant use to another restaurant use. So I'm not sure that we're going to see tremendous change in the valuation of the property. And that I know is primarily what this board is interested in. I will say, we did the 801 across the street where the old dilapidated gas station. They did refile an application to replace that with an upscale casual pizza restaurant. It's I think they have another location currently in Stratford, but the ownership is in his local residence here in Fairfield. But we did provide a letter of support, but that was mainly, wasn't so much tied to what's the valuation, the increase valuation of the property, but more, hey, we have an opportunity to replace a dilapidated structure that's been subject to a lot of blight complaints. We think it's actually a compatible use, a change of use from gas station to a food service use, and we're generally supportive of that. So I'd like to resubmit that. If anything, the plan has improved because what they did was they scaled back on the seating, both indoor and outdoor, to address some of the concerns with respect to whether or not they had adequate parking on site. And then they've also made arrangements with an abutting property owner to provide for overflow parking. So if anything, the application is hopefully better. At least it's perceived to be better this time around because they've addressed some of the concerns expressed by some of the other folks that were on the call. So, but it's not a huge economic generator either. And I will only other mention is crossings at Fairfield Metro. Probably many of you are aware. We do have an approved master plan for the site, which includes 357 residential units with commercial use on site, but the development team, there's a difference of opinion in terms of the equity investors, the folks that were part of that development group, and they've decided that they're going to put it on the market. And so they did put it on the market, and when I talked to the developer representative yesterday, they had received about half a dozen substantive offers for the site, and some very well capitalized firms that did respond. So, maybe there's a silver lining here that we end up with a development entity that has a little bit more bandwidth, both in terms of their access to capital finance this type of thing, as well as they have a bigger portfolio that can make inroads in terms of providing a true, signature mixed-use development project here. So I'll stay tuned, but they want to move quickly. So it seems like it's on a fast track. They're trying to sell their interest in the property to another development company. So hopefully we'll see that next few months.
Maybe that adjoining property next to the parking lot that's I'm forgetting the name of the family that owns it, that's been sitting there for a while. Maybe that.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that could also be scooped up if it's that company that's maybe buying that space is that capitalized. Maybe they can just make a real clean sweep.
Anyone at Black Rock Turnpike, the Reiner Estate property is actually under contract.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's under contract, subject to. So it's
got it. Okay. All right. Good.
And so they went through a pre-app process with planning and zoning. And our only concern was that it was a very residential project.
Got it.
We don't mind residential as part of mixed use, but it does have to have mixed use as part of the piece. And the development entity that has it under contract, they're not a mixed use developer. They're primarily a residential developer. So
interesting. Okay.
That's the only issue or concern that we have.
I see. Okay. All right. Any other business?
I don't think so. Hey,
Okay.
Don, Ken, you guys good?
Actually, Mark, you might want to know, how the Cumberland Farms has had a little bit of blight going itself. I ran into the new landscape contractor that he ended up landing, I think 60 Cumberland Farms in Connecticut. He got them all. So they're doing work there. They're working on it the other day. Yep. They're like, we're going to be here for 2 days. This is so bad.
Yep.
So anyways.
Good job.
Right. Yeah. So listen, everyone, thank you for
Ken might have something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay,
This is-
I saw you
this is
unmuted
really
yourself. so-
informative, though.
okay, so.
I really
in-
like, I really love this. This is informative. Thank you.
Good. Love having you aboard. So thank you everyone for spending the time. I do wish everyone a real wonderful rest of the summer and look forward to seeing everyone in September. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Let's adjourn.
There you go.
I second.
All in favor? I guess. I'll take
So you
that
have to
as a
meet in perpetual session. I'm sorry.
yes. Yes. Mark, thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, Gretchen, thank you for covering the notes on this. Take care, everyone.
All
Take
right,
care.
guys.
Thanks so long.